So if we haven't met already, my name is Martha Whiting. I'm the Content Marketing Manager here at Wynter. And today we've got a very exciting workshop guest today. This is Stewart Ehoff, who currently leads product and experimentation at RS Group, which is a FTSE 250 B2B e-commerce company. So if you don't already know, Stewart is deeply obsessed with all things process, systems, and data. And he spent a large portion of his career architecting and building operating systems that support research, experimentation, and also marketing outcomes. Now, it's a common experience that we pour time, budget, and all sorts of things into gathering insights, only for them to end up buried in PowerPoints and lost in that sea of unread emails, which we're all very familiar with. And that's exactly why we're here today, because Stewart has uncovered what he likes to call the golden thread, which is a clear, actionable path that connects that customer research directly to real business results. So in this workshop today, he's going to show you how to break that cycle and how to turn insights into impact, and exactly how he did it with RS Group. So before I hand over to Stewart, we're going to be having a Q&A session at the end of the session today. So please do keep your questions coming in throughout. The more questions, the better. Feel free to ask absolutely anything. Stewart is an open book. So keep those coming in through the chat box or in the Q&A in the Q&A section. That's absolutely fine. We'll get back to those at the end. So please join me in welcoming Stewart, and I'll welcome him onto the screen now. Here we go.
Brilliant. Thanks, Martha. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll just share my screen so we can get the content going. We can jump in and get started. So the first question that I normally get, and it's probably a bit weird to not introduce myself before introducing my company, but the question I normally always get is, who the hell are RS? Because we're probably one of the bigger companies that you've probably never heard of. So we're a B2B e-commerce retailer of products, services, and solutions. We have about 9,000 employees. We do about just shy of £3 billion a year in revenue, of which about 65% of that is digital. About millions of visitors to our website every month. So we're kind of a big deal. And just a little bit about me in terms of background, as Martha's kind of already said, I started my career in software engineering. I accidentally ended up in product and experimentation by virtue of joining RS. And I've spent the last 6 years building an experimentation culture at RS that helps us to drive superior outcomes for our customers. Now, you're probably thinking, well, okay, I'm not really a marketer, and that's right. But someone has challenged me on this and said, well, maybe actually, Stuart, maybe you are a marketer. Maybe you're just not a traditional marketer. And by virtue of the content that I'm sharing with you today, being previously hosted by myself at Spring earlier this year, and Pep believing that this content really resonates with marketers, maybe there's something in that, and I'm sure Pep is right after all. So as Martha said, we're here today to talk about research, but specific to research, we're here to talk about taking action from your research. The challenge that most companies find is that they do a lot of research, but generally it ends up getting stuffed in a drawer. Nobody really does anything about it. And people get frustrated across the company wondering, well, hang on a second, we've got customers telling us A, and then the actions that we actually take are completely disconnected from that. So I want to talk about how you can actually go about solving that problem within your business. I'm going to share some real examples of how we've done this at RS. And if you stick around long enough, I'll give you some systems that you can take away that can help you to do this in your own companies as well. So let's get started. What do I mean by research? So, as time has gone on and as digital tools have become very commoditized within our world, research can encapsulate so many different approaches, tools, and technologies, right? We've got loads of complex ways that we can talk to our customers and understand what they're doing. But really, when you boil it down, research is fundamentally just talking to users, right? I actually think there's a lot of avoidance that we do through our tools and our technologies, looking at session recordings and heat maps, etc., when we should actually just be sitting in front of our customers and talking to them and asking them good research questions, right? And at my company, we talk to customers all the time. So we take 70,000 calls a month. We operate in 36 different countries and regions. And we collect millions of data points on our customer behavior every year. But the challenge with that is that despite collecting all of this different data, when we look at our online experience at RS, we're seeing a bit of a pattern here in that, in 2018, some of our customers were telling us, against our search and filter categories for our e-commerce platform, that it would be really great if they could search by stock status. And you would think that, hey, that seems really simple, really easy to fix. Let's just go and do that, right? Now, there's a lot of technical considerations and complexities that sit actually behind this problem. And if you work in e-commerce, you probably know these pains as well. But in 2025, we still have our customers telling us through research that this is infuriating, right? It's really difficult to figure out, which products are in stock. Why can't you just have a search filter, right? So across the business, it means that our customers are pissed off, our researchers are frustrated because they're hearing the same thing over and over again. Our marketers and our product managers are frustrated because they're getting tons of different research and information that they don't know what to do with. And so you would say, okay, well, surely leadership must have a different view, right? They must know. But when I went out to leadership and I asked a few different leaders across the organization what they thought our top 5 customer problems were today, they all unfortunately gave me a different answer. So you can imagine how I must be feeling at this point in time, right? Everything just feels on fire. We can't get a straight answer from our business as to how we solve our customer problems. Our leaders don't know. It's all just a little bit depressing. So I took myself back to my desk and I said, okay, let's have a look at some research, right? I just opened up a research pack. And this is what I was presented with, just a bunch of slides, right? And this is really the crux of the problem. We've got tons of slide material, tons of rich content in here, but actually how easy is this to understand and access and take decisions from? Not very easy at all. And we have researchers who pour their souls into all of this content, all of this great slideware, and then they fire it out across email to a bunch of different stakeholders and they say, hey, did you read the research pack yet? And anyone who opens that research pack is just going to get slammed with all of these slides. They'll probably just close it and never look back, right? Now, there are companies out there who have solved for this problem, and they've done so by taking the data and the insights and the research that might normally sit in a PowerPoint presentation and turning it into what you could call institutional knowledge, right? So this isn't just research packs. These are quantitative analytics, information you might get from taking sales calls with your customers, surveys, etc. Any kind of data or information is really useful to building this institutional knowledge. And actually, the real difference just between slides versus building that brain, that institutional knowledge, is actually just turning the research that you have into data. So imagine if your research didn't live in PowerPoint, but actually it lived as data objects. Now, at the time, this was the problem that we were really trying to solve within my company. I did a bit of research around the market and a bit of poking around LinkedIn. And I heard of this guy, Ben LeBay, who was talking about this thing called XOS. Loads and loads of posts around this thing called XOS, or what it really means is experiment operating system. And Ben had this kind of thought bubble that actually companies should be taking this institutional knowledge that they have and connecting it to some sort of operating system that helps them to make better decisions. And actually, Ben was really early in his thinking here, and we'd already built a bit of a relationship. So I said to him, okay, Ben, I've got this problem. You want to try some stuff out. Let's give this thing a go. And so over 2 years, we kind of built this idea and this ecosystem around the experiment operating system together. And we were actually one of Spiro's first customers around experiment operating system. So the XOS, really what it was trying to do is create a bit of a single source of truth for our customer insights and our business problems, facilitate that cross-functional collaboration, and ultimately report on critical program stats so we could all have a clear view on actually of the research that we were doing and the actions that we were taking, what value did that create, right? Now, under the hood, the experiment operating system was doing a few things. So firstly, it was taking all of the data that we had across experiments, surveys, user research from our contact center, and many other data sources as well. And each of those little dots of data represented an observation. An observation could be a simple statement like 8.6% of add to carts increase when we prioritize stock items in search, right? By itself, that observation may not be useful. When you triangulate that with other observations, you start to build insights. And it's these insights that we can then take into problem statements that we can then start to do something about. Let's run an experiment. Let's run a marketing campaign. Let's do some more research. Let's just make a JDI change to our product. Clearly, this is broken and this is not working. Now, you might be thinking, okay, well, what is this experiment operating system? Like, what tool or what technology does it manifest in? And when we took a step back and we looked at the market, we sort of identified that for research and workflow considerations, there really wasn't much in the middle that kind of covered both aspects, right? You had some tools that were explicitly knowledge-based tools, and you had other tools that were sort of explicitly workflow management tools, right? Nothing really that sat really well in the middle. And this is where the XOS came into play. And the tool that we settled on and that we experimented around was Airtable. And the reason for this is that most tools, when you go out to market to buy B2B SaaS or whatever, any kind of tool that helps you to improve your workflow and your operations, generally it feels like you're trying to kind of shove the tooling over your business process, right? And that can often feel like fitting a square peg in a round hole. Whereas if you're really focused on your business process and then mapping your tooling to that, you get far superior outcomes. So a bit of a disclaimer before we go further anymore. We are going to talk about Airtable, but it's just worth noting that I'm not affiliated with Airtable in any way. I benefit in no way, shape, or form from promoting Airtable. If you've ever met anyone who's obsessed with Airtable as I am, they get some serious free promotion from just customers being obsessed with their products, right? Which is ultimately the best kind of product marketing. I get no kind of commission or kickback from Airtable in any way. So with that in mind, let's move on. So I'm going to talk to you about how we've used Airtable in the XOS to go through this process of data to observations to insights to action. I'm going to firstly show you how the system works, and then I'm going to give you a real world example of how we've used that to solve for a customer problem at my company. So the first piece is that we have data and observations. So as I previously said, we've got all of these individual dots that inform an observation. And what you're seeing here on screen now is a single observation. It's a very rich record that contains lots of information and metadata about the audience type that we sort of had this observation through, any insights related to this observation, which is the next stage, actions that we've taken from this particular observation, which gets us to the end, but tons and tons and tons of metadata. Who created the research, who did this particular research study. I think it's really important to capture a rich amount of data at this level, because garbage in, garbage out when it comes to the actions. So if we're driving quality at this stage, we'll drive quality at the back end. And then from observations to insights, we then have this huge table of all of the different insights that we've started to create from these triangulated observations, right? And you can see that we start to build up these enormous records of lots of illustrations and screenshots and summaries, etc. That really helps us to get a rich view of actually where are our top customer problems, and then start thinking about what we should do about it. And when we get to actions, we then start to think about a simple sort of opportunity, problem statement, solution tree, right? So we could have a single problem statement with a couple of actions, some experiments, some research, or even just a JDI, right? And in the XOS, we're cataloging these particular problem statements. We can expand them to see what actions we're currently taking against them. And we can even see against the actions, what experiments might we be running, or what type of treatments are we driving to solve for this particular customer problem. And of course, we're doing some of the other things that you might expect around monitoring our pipeline, looking at test record info, program stats, etc. As one point to all of this, as I mentioned, the garbage in, garbage out kind of protocol as I was going through this. But one piece of data that sits behind this is something that we've built called variables. And variables are really just about getting everyone on the same page with what you call stuff. The reason this is important is that if you have half of your records in a system that say these records are associated with our product page, and then the other half of your records are associated with PDP, you're not going to be able to rationalize those two data sets very easily. So it's important that you've got a really clear view on what do you call stuff within your business? What does everyone call stuff? And that when you're creating, turning your research into data, that you're being consistent with kind of the phraseology that you use against those data records. So how does it all come together? I'll give you a real world example now of that data, observations, insights, and action walkthrough that gets us to value using the experiment operating system. So here's a session recording of a customer on our product page at RS. They're looking at a particular widget thingamabob that we sell, and they really want a lot of this product clearly. So they're hammering the plus button to increase the number of units they have. They've hit it a bunch of times, they've paused for a moment, and they've decided that actually no, they still want even more units. Now, internally, we found this session recording quite hilarious, right? Because to us, it seems really obvious. Just type the quantity that you want in the box. But to this customer, clearly, from a UI perspective, this was not obvious. And when we did some further research, we realized that actually we had several observations that supported this kind of growing hypothesis that actually customers have not the easiest time trying to specifically quantify the units that they want to purchase, right? This may not be a problem for most e-commerce platforms who only sell things in quantities of 1 or 2. But at RS, we sell things in the volume of the thousands, if not the tens of thousands. And so this might just be a unique problem for us. Either way, we kind of went through this process of translating observations to insights to action. And that action then led to a series of experiments. The first experiment we ran was said, okay, well, what if we just removed the plus and minus quantity selector buttons? Maybe then by forcing users to type into the box, that solves for the problem. Generally speaking, this was a pretty inconclusive test. It didn't necessarily solve for the problem, but we couldn't confirm otherwise with the statistical data that we had to hand. So we said, okay, let's try for something a bit braver and a bit bolder. What if we put kind of prefabbed quantity selectors of press this button to get 5, press this button to get 100? Maybe that'll help. But in the same vein, we also had an inconclusive set of test results. And then the third test that we tried said, okay, what if we just added some really simple microcopy that said, instead of leaving it to the customers to guess, select or type your quantity. You can do either, being really clear and really explicit about the action. And this was the conclusive winner that we shipped to production. Now, throughout all of this, going through this data, observations, insights, and action chain, we have different people who are performing different roles, right? We've got researchers and business analysts and product owners and engineers who are all forming part of this value chain. And in a world where these two things are disconnected, normally it's the product owners and product managers or the marketeers that kind of get all the credit for, shipping something that drove value for the business. And often the people who are doing the research get left behind. Now, with this approach, actually, everyone has line of sight on the original data that supported the observations, that then drove the insight, that then drove the action to get us to value. And I've coined this the golden thread. It's that line of sight from research to action to value that enables you to connect everyone to that value chain. And when we bring this all together, this is ultimately what the XOS is doing for us at RS. We've got these two independent flywheels of research and experimentation, where research is pushing out actions to our teams to then experiment with, and those experiments are then creating learnings that are also captured through the experiment operating system. So if you wanted to give this a try, myself and the team at Spiro have kind of worked around a bit of a boilerplate or a base version of the experiment operating system in Airtable. Now, Airtable is a free tool. If you're not using it, you can sign up for an account and it's totally free. If you scan this template, you'll get a bit of a base of the experiment operating system that you can try for yourself, have a little bit of a play around with it, maybe start to input some of your research data to take that first step in getting that out of PowerPoints and getting into some institutional knowledge. In terms of what you get, it's a little bit different to some of the things I've just shown. I think that's important to note in that everyone's version of this will probably end up looking a little bit different because it's important that you build something that works for your company. And what works for you might be very different to what works for me. One point that I didn't really touch on is that this is a really great opportunity also for AI, right? We can't get away from AI. AI is everywhere. Imagine if you could ask an AI assistant, tell me what are the top 3 problems that our customers are having in this particular part of our experience, or what are the top 3 metrics that have moved, this month. The AI agent, using all the data within your institutional knowledge, can tell you these things. So it's really important, actually, that I think the asset that we're building here is also something that we can push forward into AI engines that then help us to make better decisions for our businesses in general. So just a few takeaways from me before we wrap up. research really, to me, should live as data, not PowerPoint. So if there's anything that you take away from this and you're thinking, God, all our research really just does sit in PowerPoint presentations, doesn't it? Maybe that's the first action that you should take to try and solve for. The second is don't force your tooling to match your business process, because it'll end up being painful. Although it's maybe a little bit of a longer journey to do a bit of a build/buy process, I think you'll end up with far superior outcomes creating something that works for you and the uniqueness of your company, rather than taking something generic and trying to shove it into the way that you work, right? That generally doesn't work well from my experience. And so my recommendation is a bit of a combination of build and do a bit of buying if you need to for now. But the market is evolving rapidly around this space, and there are SaaS companies, like Atlassian, who are looking at this challenge, and they're building some new tools around, Jira to help do this better. Airtable are also building their own kind of pre-built version of a base that helps them to, more easily deploy this app to some of their customers. There's also a couple of challenger companies that are starting to look at this particular problem as well. So I think there's a growing SaaS market for this as well. But for now, I would recommend building. So that's all from me. Thank you very much for your time today. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, you can scan the QR code, and I'll now move over to take any questions from the audience. Thank you for your time.
Okay, perfect. Thank you ever so much, Stuart. So good to hear how you managed to implement everything and more about XOS as well. So yeah, like Stuart said, we're ready for any questions if anyone's got any, but I'd like to kick off actually, because I know you mentioned that, lots of research is stuck in decks right now. I work as a researcher at Wynter. That's one of our key things, is making sure we're acting on it. We're making sure we're getting those insights out there. So if someone's sat in this position today where their research is stuck in decks, what would you say is the very next step they should take today? What should they do right now? Because obviously XOS is a big thing to get involved with. So yeah, what could you do today if you're in that position?
For sure, yeah. It probably looks very comprehensive, because there's a couple of years of kind of research and development and testing and learning that have gone into everything that I've just shown. But I think the first step is to just figure out how might you just take one piece of research and kind of take out the key points and the key data. Normally, these research packs have a bit of a summary slide of like key takeaways or key kind of data points or observations. So actually, I would suggest that you've probably already got the data in bullet points. You maybe just need to start uploading it to a database and doing a bit of kind of tagging of metadata around it to help people to find it. So just start once, see how that process feels, and then you can take it from there and do more.
Okay, amazing. Perfect. And so once you found that golden thread, like you were talking about, what changed? How did it feel different for you from when you first joined and when you first started on the project to once you'd found that place? How did it feel, and what shifted for you? It could be in terms of the team or culturally, or just how your workflow was.
I think the biggest change that we saw was in the motivation and participation of our researching teams.
Okay.
They felt really motivated to actually see that rather than their work being stuffed into a drawer, actually it's making a difference, right? It's, I think a lot of time that researchers spend in companies is normally spent trying to get people to do something about it, right? Like, hey, why are you focusing on that thing over there when I've got a bunch of research that tells me that actually our customers probably care about this a little bit more? So the researchers weren't having to fight as hard, and they saw the rewards of the work that they did. They could actually see the outcome of, hey, we found out this customer problem and now we've solved for it. That's really satisfying from an individual perspective, but also from a team morale perspective.
Okay, brilliant. And so say you are sitting with that research as well, how do you help execs see the true value in that? Research is often seen as kind of a nice to have, but it's actually a revenue driver as well. So what would you recommend there in terms of the framing and how would you suggest putting that forward and kind of getting execs excited about acting on this research rather than letting it sit there?
Mm-hmm. I think this framework is it's not the only way to do it, but it's a good way to do it because you create that line of sight, right? So normally research can be seen as a little bit of a nice to have and not a value driver, because researchers struggle to connect the work to the actions that are being taken across the business. So this is a great way to do that. But outside of kind of me just saying, just use this type of system to solve the problem, that's not the only way. I think the alternative to not doing research is guessing, right? So if you're not researching and using that as the foundation of how you make decisions, how else are you doing it? And I think for companies that are not, they're probably just dreaming up thoughts in the shower of what campaigns they should run or what features they should ship, or and not actually listening to their customers. I think it's those businesses that long term are unfortunately doomed to fail. So you could draw a line between that and say that research, helps companies to not fail, right?
Absolutely. Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Stuart. We've just had a question come through from Monica here. I don't know if you can see that as well in the chat box as well, Stuart.
Yes.
Monica's saying that great presentation, and she also handles research as data. She's been trying to handle also bits and pieces of content in a structured way with labels for quicker implementation in different channels for different ICPs at different stages. Have you also included positioning messaging as an outcome of the research?
Yeah, so there are multiple different outcomes that you can drive through this type of research approach. So for us, the primary method is products, experimentation, and there are some marketing touch points as well. But irrespective, Monica, of what your research inputs are and then what the actions are that you take, you can apply this modeling and this framework to work for you, right? So if you're looking at ICP research and then testing out different positioning, you could absolutely funnel your research in, draw observations and conclusions, and then come up with different ideas and hypotheses to test from a message positioning standpoint, right? So absolutely, I think this is generally a universally applicable framework.
Okay, perfect, brilliant. And I know you mentioned as well for XOS to get implemented, it took a couple of years. Obviously, you're a much bigger company. I'm really intrigued to understand a little bit more about the challenges that you face. And although those might be different from the people listening in today, what were the challenges there, and how did you work around those to get yourself to a good point?
Yes, I think one of the main challenges that we faced is that I think we bit off a little bit more than we could chew when we were starting to kind of create this framework and this ecosystem. So the first time that we built this, we realized we'd made a ton of mistakes, and we put the whole thing in the bin and started again. So, I guess the advice in that is maybe think a little bit about kind of your data architecture and how you might structure kind of the research as data before you go in and build, because otherwise you'll end up creating something that just isn't valuable, isn't usable. The other challenge was really around adoption and sort of change management, I guess. So fundamentally, what we're talking about here is a different way of working for our teams, right? And people always get comfortable with the tools and the systems that they know and love, right? So our product teams were in Jira, our research teams had a big old SharePoint drive with loads of research packs in it. That's what they were used to. And instead, we were asking people to kind of unite and come together in this new system, which felt like extra work. Actually, the framing around this is that it's not extra work, it's just different work, right? Imagine if, as a researcher, you didn't have to spend half of your time convincing people to do something about your research, and actually you just spent your time inputting it into this knowledge base where you had a captive audience waiting for your research, right? That's a very different mindset. So we had to kind of create the demand on both sides and kind of go through a bit of a change adoption curve. But once we got a couple of sort of teams using the system, we could then use that as an example of, hey, these guys are using it and it's really powerful for them. You want to get on the bus?
Okay, perfect. Brilliant. Well, I'm not sure that we have any more questions, but that was super insightful, Stuart. Thank you ever so much. It's been really good to hear about how you've implemented this so successfully as well. So congratulations for you and your team. It's been really good to hear this talk again. We heard it for the first time at Spring, which was fantastic. So it's been really nice to have a refresher on it, and also hearing more about the AI stuff as well. So thank you ever so much. So if anyone has any more questions for Stuart or anything about XOS they want to learn more about, feel free to reach out to Stuart on LinkedIn. I'm sure he'll be welcome to answering any questions. And if you have any questions for me as well about research, getting involved with Wynter or anything like that, please reach out to me at any time. But thank you ever so much, everyone, for joining today. And hopefully we'll catch you next week for our next Wynter workshop. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.